Hello, I'm Don Ward, Chief Executive of CIB, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the latest episode of CIB in Conversation. CIB is the global network for collaboration in research and innovation in the built environment. And to everyone watching this conversation today, a very warm welcome, and I hope you'll enjoy the next few minutes. For more information about what we do and how we add value for our global community, please refer to our website shown here on the backdrop behind me. So these conversations are all about meeting the personalities behind leaders in the world of built environment research. And today, we're really pleased to welcome Mark Hastak, current Vice President of CIB and a professor at Purdue University in the United States. So Mark, welcome to CIB in Conversation.
Thank you, Don. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a great pleasure, and thank you for serving so well as our Vice President. Let's start by giving you a chance to introduce yourself. What's your current role and involvement in the world of research and innovation in construction?
Sure. So, Don, I'm presently the professor and head of construction engineering and management at Purdue University, and I'm also a professor of civil engineering here at Purdue. I've been in this role for good 14 years. Started in 2007, came back to Purdue in 2001. So I think you asked about my background a bit. So if I might just go into that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear your background and sort of how you got to where you are today, as it were. Yeah, how did you get started?
Well. It started way back when I was doing my bachelor's studies in India. And after finishing my degree in civil engineering, I started working for a consulting firm. And my role was in the nexus of design and construction. And the construction part really fascinated me in understanding, how can we deliver projects on schedule, within the cost, safety, and all the other parameters that we look for, and quality as well. And after working for a few years with that firm, I decided to start my graduate studies. And from one thing to the next, I came to the US, and I came to University of Cincinnati, where I did my master's working with Sam Minkara, Ben Wakwe, and some of the old participants of CIB over the past years. And after finishing my master's at Cincinnati, I started my PhD at Purdue.
Right.
And during my master's studies, I was looking at project control, why costs escalates on a project, and what we can do to control it. So coming to Purdue, I worked with folks such as Dan Halpin, Mirek Skibnevsky, Jorge Vanegas, again, all hands at CIB. And I started working at that time in robotics and also project controls, primarily cost escalation, and how can we manage that, what are the risks involved in project controls, and so on. After finishing my PhD at Purdue, I went to Georgia Tech, did my postdoc there, working with Jorge Vanegas. And there again, I was working on some CII-funded research on cost effectiveness in the industry, particularly for capital projects. And after spending about 15 months as a postdoc at Georgia Tech, I got my first tenure track appointment at NYU, which at that time was called Polytechnic University. Later on got taken over by NYU. And there again, I worked in different areas, starting my career as a young academic, working with folks such as Bud Griffiths, Al Goodman, Ilan Duran. And I'm saying these names because they were very active in CIB in the past years, and they were also my mentors. So they helped me get started, get on the right footing, and start my academic career. So from NYU, after spending a few years there, I was called back to University of Cincinnati, where Professor Minkara was getting ready to retire. and he wanted me to come back, and so I came back to Cincinnati. I was on the faculty for the good 3 years, and from there I came back to Purdue in 2001 and have been there ever since. So in 2007, when Dan Halpin was getting ready to retire, I was offered the position as the head of the department. And so I started my present role in 2007 and have been actively engaged in research, interaction with the industry, and so on. So over all these past years, I've had a great chance and great opportunity to work with agencies such as, of course, CIB, Association for Advancement of Cost Engineering, the Global Leadership Forum for Construction Engineering Programs, of course, ASCE, the Construction Industry Institute, and so on. And it has given me a very good perspective of course, what are the research needs within the industry and how best academia can play a role in trying to address them.
It's a great introduction, Mark. Thank you very much. I mean, can you say a little bit more about how you made the switch? You were in your early career, you were a consultant, and then, you know, when you started your PhD, did you see yourself as switching into academia for the rest of your career, or was it something that you thought you'd go back to being a consultant after you got the doctorate?
Well, that's an interesting question. When I was working in the consulting firm, I would go on the site and I would interact with the contractors and other teams working on the site, and I always felt that why are we doing it this way? Maybe there's a better way of doing things, and why am I not having difficulty, managing the cost and getting things done within the schedule? And that really got me started thinking about grad school. And I remember a funny story that when I was leaving my firm, I was talking to the principals at that time, and they said, "Well, what are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I'm going to do my master's in construction engineering and management, and then I'm going to do my PhD."
Yeah.
So, oh, PhD in what? Structures? I said, "No, in construction engineering and management." And they were sort of surprised that that there are programs such as these.
Yes.
And that was early 90s, and so I said, no, there are very good programs in this area. That's really what I want to do. So I knew that I wanted to do my PhD, and I wanted to explore the area of research after having worked for a few years in the industry. So from one thing to the next, came to Cincinnati, from there to Purdue, and that really got me started.
And I mean, do you think, can you think of any, well, I guess the advantages of having worked in the industry first and then coming into academia are fairly obvious. What any disadvantages compared with other routes, as it were, to academia that occur to you?
Well, not really disadvantage. I mean, there are a lot of advantages of having worked in the industry before coming back to academia.
Yeah.
Disadvantage would be, the work style, the expectations, and the different nature of academic research, thought process, reporting, deliverables. They are different. The academic style is different than the industry style of reporting, for instance.
Yes.
And so I had to quickly adjust to that as I came back into academia, and sort of figure out, what is the best way of balancing both my knowledge from the industry and then what I was learning in academia at that time.
So it occurs to me that we'll probably have quite a lot of students and early career researchers watching this. So some of whom may have come through the same route as yourself, although I guess it's not as common to come the industry route, as it were, into academia. But you've mentioned one or two things like the value to you of mentorship and also this challenge of a different reporting style and so on. Is there any one tip or piece of advice that you would give to people who might be thinking of or might find themselves following a similar path to yourself?
Well, I think it's a great way of getting to understand, firsthand that what are the needs of the industry? What one needs to understand as a researcher, that what are the problems facing the industry? What are the constraints? So as one looks at a research topic and wants to explore that further, that they have that perspective in the background, that why is that a problem, and why is it that we are actually wanting to research that, and how are the outcomes likely to benefit industry at large. And what I've found over the years is that oftentimes we do academic research that might sit on the shelf and might not see the light of the day. And I have always insisted that my students should also point out that is it ready to apply in the industry? If it is ready to apply, then how do we propose that it should be used? If
Yes.
it is not yet ready to be applied, then what other things need to be done so that it gets ready to be applied, and not let it sit on the shelf and gather dust, so to say. Uh, and I think that that perhaps came from my working in the industry and having a good understanding of what the needs were.
And actually, one other angle occurs to me as well. You obviously, having worked in industry, did a master's and PhD and stayed in academia. What do you think? How would you make the case to an employer that someone who wants to do a master's and PhD but will return to the industry? How would this equip them to be more valuable to their employer after it? So someone that doesn't want to go the academic route, but how would a PhD still benefit them on behalf of their employer and for their career staying in industry?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And if I were to reflect on my own career, my own progression, my own maturity, so to say, as it developed over the years, is when I did my bachelor's, I thought I had a broad base understanding of what civil engineering was, what construction engineering was, and how to manage projects and so on. But once I landed on this site, I soon realized that no, I really didn't know quite as much. I had a general understanding, but there were a lot of issues that I could perhaps improve how I manage projects, or how I design projects, and how I deliver to the client. That I need to understand what is the latest and greatest techniques available. And so when I came and did my master's, it certainly opened my eyes and started making connections between different pieces of knowledge that you go through in undergraduate curriculum. And those connections were really helpful for me in putting concepts, so putting theoretical concepts to practical application. And then from there, when I did research for my PhD, I was again looking at project control. I was looking at what are the factors that influence cost, and how can we separate the symptoms from the actual cause for those cost escalation. And that was very fascinating study. I found it very fascinating, and that gave me even a better understanding of the functionalities, the interactions, the risk elements that we face in the construction industry, and what are the interdependencies, and how those interdependencies play out on a construction project. So clearly, if I would tend to say that when you do research at that level, your understanding can certainly benefit industry and academia both.
Really, I find it very, very fascinating, Mark, that you as Vice President and our current President, Keith Hampson, both started in industry and then moved across, as it were, to academia. And I think the more that we can encourage this message that of the value of a spell or an understanding of academia, how much that benefits industry, and conversely, I think CIB will be doing a great service for the improvement of the sector as a whole. I mean, CIB was originally founded as from the from a group of research and technology organizations. It wasn't a university-centric organization. It was RTOs, research and technology organizations, after in the 1950s. And you know, where CIB is going is, yes, it's got lots of academic faculty involved with us, but we still want those who are carrying out research and innovation in the private sector, in industry, or indeed just those that are interested in getting the benefit and the value out of research and innovation into the industry, to be participating in what we do. So I've been fascinated to hear about your background, and it is an interesting coincidence that two of our three key officers have that sort of industry and academic background. So thank you, Mark. What we'll do now is we'll move on and chat about your own area of specialist area of research, so construction and engineering management. Tell us just a little bit more about your take on this topic area, and why it's why it's important, you know, what its relative importance in the whole spectrum of built environment research.
Sure. Well, Don, I started from early part of my academic career. I started looking into risk management and decision making in construction. And what fascinated me right from the beginning was that what are the various risk factors that we face in the construction industry in various aspects, and I'll elaborate on that in just a second. But how can we identify what are those risk factors? What role do they play? How do they come up on a particular project? And how can they be managed? So that really was my focus. And then, of course, from that point on, you know, what strategic decisions need to be made to actually take care of those risk factors and mitigate those risk factors. So in that sense, you know, my umbrella of my research, if I were to say, is really risk management and decision making in construction.
Right.
Now, within that, I have focused my work in what I call as 5 buckets, and those buckets are really infrastructure management. We do work in related to capital project investment. How do you identify how projects need to be rehabilitated? How do you optimize the amount of resources available to you, and the extent of rehabilitation needs that exist? And how do you balance that? How do you make sure that you know, facilities or other parts of built environment that you might be dealing with is in good condition in that sense? So so one of my buckets is infrastructure management, and within that, you know, I also co-authored a book with Professor Al Goodman called Infrastructure Planning, Engineering, and Economics. And so the second bucket that I've been working on is really profitability of construction companies.
Right.
Now, how companies can be more profitable, and by that, what we mean is, what is the ability of a construction firm to be profitable? Are there sick units within the organization that are actually reducing the prospects of increased profit for that organization? And how can we identify what those sick units are, and then take, you know, corrective measures so that that could be strategically improved?
Well, I think we might have some industry leaders watching, Mark. So I'm sure they will be fascinated to know if you've got any key nuggets or lessons that perhaps they would benefit from.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, what we have done is we look at it in terms of cost centers and profit centers. So profit centers are our projects, maybe equipment yard, or maybe real estate holdings that we might have that is going to generate some income for the company. And then there are cost centers. All the supporting elements, such as the bidding department, accounting, human resources, estimating, you know, these are what we call as the cost centers that do not generate revenue by themselves, but they are essential for generating that profit for a company. So the question is, what is this interaction between these cost centers and profit centers? And if those neurons are not firing properly, so to say, then that is going to lead to loss in revenue, that is going to lead to delays in projects, simply because there's not good coordination between these units. Or it could be that, in your bidding department, let's say if your success ratio is 2 in 10, and if you take a deep dive into just studying your bidding department, you might find that you don't have enough gray hair, or you don't have resources in that particular group to make good decisions and good calls and submit some winning tenders or winning bids. And so the method that we have developed allows you to identify what those bottlenecks are within your organization, and then what strategic decisions could be made to improve that. So we drill it all the way down to your work breakdown structure and which work packages are actually getting affected by those neurons not firing properly, or those interaction between cost centers and profit centers not working effectively. So that's the research we have done in profitability. Recently,
and where would people find out a little bit more information about that, Mark? Is it easily found from your website?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all our publications and reports are listed on my website. And if not, I'm easy to find. Just
Yes.
reach out to me, and I'll be more than happy to talk more about it.
Absolutely. Okay. So if people can't find you, they can contact you via CIB. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. And recently, what we have done is one of my PhD students, we extended our research in profitability, and we started looking at once we have identified what the bottlenecks are, then what best practices exist that not only in construction industry but in other industries as well, that can be used by that company to get rid of that bottleneck or to improve their situation.
Yeah.
So that is something most recently that we have finished that work. If I may continue down that path, my third bucket is disaster risk reduction. So the impact of natural disasters or natural hazards on industries and communities, and the role played by infrastructure. And what we've done is we looked at coming from a civil engineering construction background, that
Yes.
seemed to be obvious to be focusing on infrastructure. But slowly we learned that we need to expand the definition of infrastructure. We cannot simply be focusing on civil infrastructure, but we need to focus really on 7 layers of infrastructure. So civil, civic, social, environmental, educational, financial, and then the 7th being cyber. Right. So if we think about it, I'm sure you will agree with me that just having civil infrastructure in good shape after a disaster is not sufficient if you don't have good governance, if you don't have a good social support structure that would help the affected communities, be more resilient, and recover from the shock, the mental anguish that they have faced because of the loss due to that disaster. And if you think through that, the financial aspect, the educational aspect, they all need to tie together for us to say that a community is truly resilient if they have sufficient capacity in all these 7 infrastructure layers. So that's just been the focus of our research. We have looked at how to identify critical infrastructure, how to determine their vulnerability, what would be the severity in terms of social and financial aspects if they were to fail, and then what type of capacities are needed for achieving a feasible resilience. And by feasible resilience, I mean that what you can afford. Can you afford to recover next day, or can you afford to recover within 2 or 3 months? And the amount of resources and capacities required, of course, would change with that answer.
Mark, I find it fascinating. Each time I do one of these conversations, I learn something about that I wish I'd known earlier in my career, around best practice or something, or a connection that I wish I'd made earlier in my career. It's one of the great strengths of CIB, and to my regret that I wasn't involved with the organization sooner in my previous roles. does the scope of your work on disasters, natural disasters, did it or does it now cover global pandemics and the impact of COVID-19, for example? And if so, perhaps you could say a little bit more about what is, the current headline of the year of the last 12 months has affected everybody in the world in many ways. Perhaps you have a few thoughts in this area.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, our research looks at all disasters and all hazards across the globe.
Yes.
And my research team explores all events that are happening around the world and see, how they either support or negate the theories that we are proposing in terms of disaster risk reduction, disaster risk management. And you mentioned pandemic that really clearly points out. I'll just take one example. For instance, the supply chain, and I'm sure we have realized with the supply of vaccines and other support infrastructure that is required, that having a robust supply chain is critical for getting vaccines to different individuals around the globe, and making sure that everybody is safe in that regard. So if you think through that, I'm sure you'll agree with me that the infrastructure plays a critical role in that supply chain. So our focus is on the infrastructure supply chain, and how we can make sure that the infrastructure has sufficient capacities for making that particular event more resilient. In this case, delivering vaccines, for instance. So we are looking at. I have a team looking at the impact of the pandemic on the supply chain, and how that was robust enough. So we're looking at Texas, for instance. We had a severe winter storm in Texas, and that really caused a lot of problems in terms of power outages and the resulting impact. So I have a team looking into that right now in terms of what infrastructure failures happen, and given that we have a hurricane season coming up pretty soon, that what lessons can be learned so that we can then be prepared for the next set of hazards and the impending disasters thereof.
And can you point from your work so far? Can you point to any changes that you think we'll see in the sector, whether that's in what we build or how we build it?
I think what we are exploring also is that communities need to identify where vulnerabilities lie within their infrastructure network. And I use that word carefully because I'm referring to now the 7 layers of infrastructure. Yes. And within that, you need to understand what are the interdependencies. So for instance, if you take a hospital would rely not only on the civil infrastructure for transportation of patients and medical teams and so on, but it will also depend on civic infrastructure for regulations, policies, support from your police force, etc. And at the same time would also depend on your social infrastructure for providing support services to the patients, of course, educational, financial, and so on. They play a major role in terms of how a community can be resilient. So that's really what we are looking into in terms of what research needs to be done and how we can help communities be better prepared for coming disasters. Now, the problem that happens is that if you are a utility and you need to really convince, forget utility, any infrastructure agency, they need to convince those who are going to approve investing in those projects that investment is really important, that we do need to build capacities. This time we had a 100-year flood, next time we might have a 500-year flood. And the question is, it's a probabilistic event. Is it justified to invest so much money in building capacities that you may not see for a while? So that is always a challenge. So the research that we are trying to do is to enhance those arguments and to provide evidence behind those arguments that yes, by investing in building capacities for these various infrastructure is actually going to be beneficial.
And I mean, is it too simplistic to sort of think about the impact of, say, home working and you know, meaning that the relative importance of cyber infrastructure is going to grow relative to, say, transport infrastructure or civic buildings? You know, if people are working at home, less risk maybe to do with office infrastructure, but more to do with the cyber side of things. That the sort of what an example of the balances you're looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we look in terms of disasters and how that influences all related infrastructure. But yes, I mean, you can extend that logic over to working from home as well, and the impact of COVID-19 and the pandemic that we all are facing. What it has brought forth is that not only, as you mentioned, the need for a more robust cyber infrastructure, better modes of communication, just as we are doing now, and you know, and also what is the impact of working out of home on the culture of that organization, and you know, the advantage of physically working with your coworkers was that interaction, you know, that shaking hands and sharing experience and knowledge as you go to work every day. And in a remote environment, you tend to lose that. As much as we might converse over Zoom and other media, you know, that personal touch often is lost.
Yes.
And what we are finding is that, especially for students, that the mental stress has gone up as well. You know, for instance, in your college life, your college environment is interacting with your fellow students, interacting with faculty, interacting with staff, getting into the social, cultural aspect of learning, and develop yourself as a complete individual. Now, with this pandemic situation in the lockdown environment, students are not able to interact with each other. They are sitting in their dorm rooms or
Yes.
in their respective homes, uh, taking lectures and classes and so on. So those who have moved from high school to university haven't really experienced that full university experience as well in the pandemic environment. So the question is, you know, how is that going to impact the outcome? If those students were to go all 4 years, half of that in pandemic lockdown situation, you know, it's not clear that what is going to be the long-term impact of that on these individuals as professionals.
And do you think there's any lessons learned that would impact that would permanently impact that you know that would change the education and teaching model then? Or do you think, you know, all things being equal, we just go back to the old model, the pre-pandemic face-to-face model and so on? Or do you think there will be some long-term changes in this?
I think absolutely there are long-term changes. You know, we all have seen the benefits as well as the drawbacks of distance education, distance interaction, distance learning, whatever distance. And there are definitely advantages that universities as well as organizations are going to evaluate to see what type of advantage does that give them in terms of being more competitive and being more productive, perhaps. Many other firms are allowing their employees to work from home right now because of COVID situation. But I'm sure they're also considering that if we were to continue this in the post-COVID environment, then what are the benefits of that? Or what are the disadvantages as well? So it is going to have a lasting impact, in my opinion. Definitely in academia, we see that you know, we were forced to move to online courses.
Yep.
Now we are finding that there are more pedagogical developments, enhancements. How do we deliver online content? So there's no going back. This is move in the right direction in many ways. And we'll just have to find out what is that good balance.
Yes.
How can we, for instance, issues such as make it more affordable? How can we make education more affordable for our students? Presently, in the US universities, students in engineering at least take about 4.5 years to graduate. Now, could we make it possible that they are able to graduate in 4 years? Maybe even less than 4 years. It's a 4-year program. They take 4.5 years. So, can online education, distance education, perhaps allow that flexibility? Can we, so in our program, for instance, we require 3 internships. Our students go out and work with the industry for 12 weeks every summer. Can they take courses while they are working for a company elsewhere? And all of that is possible if we have online content, if we are thinking out of the box and not being rigid in terms of 2 semesters or 3 semesters to a year, and and the delivery modes, pedagogical modes that we normally follow. So clearly, the changes are there to stay. We just need to figure out how to make that most effective and most productive in terms of affordability for our students, making sure that there is a better reach for places and students that were earlier not able to afford a university
Yeah.
education. And at the same time, not compromising the quality of students and the professionals that we educate in terms of serving the industry. And at the same time, we need to work with the industry as academics to understand how industry is going to change with respect to the changes forced due to the pandemic, and what type of training is necessary at the university level so that the new breed of professionals, so to say, if I may use that word, are ready and effective in that Zoom environment or in that electronic environment, so to say,
Yes.
of
Yeah.
being more productive.
Mark, I think that's a very exciting prospect. Actually, they're quite enticing to think that one impact would be to lower barriers to entry, as it were, so that more people, in terms of cost and time barriers, more people might be able to undertake higher levels of education. Can only be a good thing for society. I hadn't heard that put in those words before, so I find that very, very exciting. We've only managed to cover 2 or 3 areas of your own research interests and your own research group there in the time available. But I just wondered, before we leave this subject, whether you've any insight into what you think the next big research question is, whether it's one that your group will be looking at or more generally.
I think one of the buckets, my 5th bucket. I didn't get to my 5th bucket.
Well, I'm
But I
sorry.
jumped
Yes,
there.
sorry. Time has run out a little.
No, but to answer your question, the 5th bucket is really contemporary issues, and I like that bucket because that allows us to explore whatever is of interest and whatever is contemporary at that point in time in terms of industry needs and so on. So within that, we have introduced theories such as the intelligent planning units. How can we break down a built environment into a smallest unit that can be managed, can be optimized in terms of all different KPIs that you might think about, and replicate that throughout the built environment. We have also started looking at construction analytics. And many of my colleagues here at Purdue, we are very research active faculty throughout our campus, and they're looking into applications of virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality. How to use IT for safety, IT for infrastructure, data analytics, and so on. So these are some of the cutting edge areas, in my opinion, that we really need to expand and explore. So more IT, more use of smart objects, intelligent planning units, as I mentioned. There's a serious need for the construction industry to consider systematic data analytics that will allow us to do pros and cons and slicing and dicing of the data, make sure that by making a systematic effort that we are actually putting structure in place to collect the data that is going to help us make those right decisions
Right.
on our projects. Unfortunately, that is not done as effectively as we would think it should be done. And so we are looking into that area and see how data analytics could be improved for the construction industry. Um,
And when I think about use of digital, Mark, construction is often held up as being behind other sectors in our exploitation of what's available. Is that the case in this area as well? I mean, obviously, the stuff we can always learn from other sectors, but where would you compare construction to other sectors in terms of our maturity at the moment?
I think we have a long way to go.
Yeah.
Construction, by the nature of how we do contracts, in my opinion, holds us back. If you have a lump sum contract, there's not much scope for innovation in that environment. You need to deliver within the cost that you have promised. So that sort of, in my opinion, holds us back. And I think uh, owners and clients, in my opinion, can play a major role in forcing change in the industry by requiring innovation, by supporting innovation, by taking the risk out of the hands of a contractor that may not want to go for new things if it is a fixed price contract. So I think many of these structural elements that we have in the industry sort of hold us back in terms of innovation. But nonetheless, there are many companies that are very innovative. They're trying different techniques and different avenues for improving their productivity, being more competitive, being on the cutting edge. So we do have companies of that sort also. And you mentioned digital environment. That is definitely the way to go in the future. Digital twins, many researchers around the world are working in digital twins, and how the BIM environment and other digital media can be effectively used in improving quality, improving productivity, improving the way that we deliver these projects, and reducing or identifying bottlenecks ahead of time, so that when we do get to the site, that we already know what risks are likely to come up, and we are sort of prepared for that in not only availability of resource, but in terms of design modifications, in terms of constructability, and also from a contractual standpoint.
Well, Mark, thank you. And one of the things that strikes me is I think you've covered 6 or 7 areas of research, including construction management, digital risk management, disasters, education, the education model, procurement, you mentioned there, and contract at the end, innovation. All of these are CIB working commission topics, which so you've a very broad coverage covering a large amount of CIB's work, which I suppose allows me to see if we can't get you to give a plug for CIB here. Given that you've covered so much of our commission's agenda, and given that at the start you mentioned how CIB was useful for you in terms of some of the contacts you were able to make, some of the global leaders in your research area that you were able to meet and network with and provided mentorship for you. I mean, if you were to describe the value of CIB to others, how would you encourage them? How would you sell CIB? Why should they get involved?
Absolutely. I think if I were to take that perspective from a young academic's point of view, one thing that I find among our young academics is that they find it very difficult to establish a network
Right.
of colleagues, network of researchers. First of all, within their own place of residence in their own country and then across the world. Now, organizations such as CIB and others provide that avenue that young academics can capitalize on in getting to know other researchers around the world and get to know what type of research they're doing, how they can collaborate in their own areas of expertise. And the biggest part of that is that all of these young academics to build their career and advance within their career through different ranks need to have a support structure that can talk about their research, that can talk about their proficiency, their intellectual merit, and their scholarship. And only if you have a good network of other researchers that know you, understand you, have been around for a while in terms of seniority, can write you good letters. And those good letters can only help you as a young academic in going through the promotions and establishing yourself as the future leaders within the industry. So I think organizations such as CIB, GLF, AACE or ASC, whatever organizations you take that are global in nature, particularly CIB, helps a lot. In my opinion, it helped me, and I'm sure it has helped many others to establish those links. Not only that, at Purdue, I mentioned, we have three strong groups of faculty that offer education in construction. So one is my unit, which is construction engineering and management, which is a standalone unit within the college. And then we have a group in civil that also focuses on construction. And then we have a very good, strong group in building construction technology, all looking at different aspects of construction, how to deliver a project in time, and so on. And many of our faculty throughout these three units have interacted with CIB and have definitely benefited working on different commissions and interacting with colleagues with similar interests. So to young academics, I would say, hey, this is a good group. And the more you interact, the more you get to know people. Some of them are the same names you're reading on the papers that you're reading for your research.
Yes.
And to getting to know them personally and to interact with them and exchange ideas that you might have, they might be thinking about, that can only benefit.
Mark,
And I
that's
think
terrific
that's
advice.
the way to do it.
We have a lot of early career researchers involved in our global network, specifically for ECRs, as we call them, and that's great advice for all of them. I'm sure, and it resonates with me. Although I was never an academic, I worked for the building research establishment in the UK, and I can remember the excitement the day I actually met the guy who had written one of the key papers that I was drawing on. So I echo what you've said there totally. So thank you very much indeed. Mark, I've got one final question for you before we finish. Thank you so much for your time today. And we've overrun what I thought might be the target time for this chat by quite a bit, and that's because you've had so much interesting stuff to chat about. But we like to finish by asking all our guests for what we call our top opportunity. And what I mean by that is, in your field of expertise, and we've already established that's quite a broad field, quite a number of areas. Nevertheless, what would you say is the top opportunity or challenge that politicians and policymakers around the world should be thinking about?
I think that's a very interesting question, Don. What in my program, if I were to start from there, we have our program is experiential program, so we interact with the industry, and over the past 40 plus years that we have existed as a separate unit, we have interacted with over 180 different companies. These are global companies, and as well as government entities and policymakers in that group. Now, why I say that is because I believe that it is very important that there is a good interaction between academia and industry.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, I alluded to that earlier, that there's extremely good work being done in the industry that never reaches academic environments because decisions are made on the site, and innovation happens. You move on, you deliver what you need to deliver to the client, and that does not get documented or shared with the rest of the world and in academic circles. At the same time, in academia, there's a lot of great work going on, a lot of innovation, a lot of research. Just thinking about all the PhDs that we graduate, they have all, by definition, have produced something that did not exist before. So clearly, there's innovation that is sitting on the shelf that we somehow need to find how to disseminate that, not only in academic circles, but benefit to the industry. And we need to find ways of making that happen, whether that be through interaction on policy boards, whether that be by providing learning experience for as a continuing learning opportunity for industry professionals, whether that be sending our academics, young and old alike, to spend their summer working on a site, working for a company, putting boots on the ground, so to say, and getting to learn firsthand. And we do that actually. In my unit, we do that. We place our young academics with one of the other companies. They spend their entire summer, and once they've spent one summer, they want to do more, and that's great. So at the same time, if we can have better interaction with policymakers and decision makers at the government level, then that is definitely going to influence policy that would be grounded in research, that would be well informed in terms of why such a policy or a policy change is important. And particularly I mentioned earlier about our research in disaster risk reduction, that becomes extremely important that we are able to convince the regulators and the decision makers that investment in improving the robustness of the capacity of critical infrastructure is extremely important, and in the long run, that is only going to save money and life for everybody. It's going to be beneficial for everybody. So clearly, research plays a critical role in impact on policy as well as practice. So I think coming back to CIB, what I have felt very important about this organization is that just the participants, the members that we have, allow us to bridge between research, policy, and practice. And I think that is definitely another value that I didn't mention earlier, but offered by CIB.
Thank you for bringing us back so neatly to that finish. And what some people call the triple helix of the collaboration and synergy between academia, industry, and governments. It's a very fine place to finish, and we shouldn't be surprised that you brought us back there, given how you described your early career and how you developed yourself. So, Mark, I just want to say thank you so much. I found that fascinating. I'm sure that our audience will have enjoyed hearing from you as well. To anyone who's watched this or listened to this and wants more information, as you heard, you can contact Mark at Purdue University, or for more details of CIB or to get hold of Mark, you can also contact us through our website, which you can see on the screen behind me. So finally, just to finish this broadcast, we always welcome feedback and suggestions on all of our work at any time. So if you have any thoughts on what you've heard today, or perhaps some suggestions for who you'd like to hear from, who you'd like CIB in conversation to talk to next, please do contact us. But that's it for today. I've been Don Ward. Many thanks to Mark Hastak, and goodbye for now from CIB. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Mark.